Hello, thank you everyone for joining us today. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Representatives Miller,
Here.
Heiss,
Present.
Stone,
Here.
Young,
Here.
Kofia,
Here.
Devendorf, Fitzgerald,
Here.
Reingens,
Here.
Nyer,
Here.
Vanderwall,
Present.
Roth,
Here.
Beerline,
Here.
Smith.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Pice moves to adopt the minutes of September 14th, 2023. Today we will hear testimony on Senator Polanski's Senate Bill 148 and Senator Hertel's Senate Bill 149. Presenters, we have quite a few folks wishing to speak, so I ask that you keep your testimony to 3 minutes. Members, please keep your questions limited to 1 per presenter. To ensure that we can finish in a timely manner, we have quite a few speakers today. Thank you. Come forward. Oh, okay. Okay, hang on. Okay.
Yes.
We're going to go at ease. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you very much for hearing testimony on these bills. Legislation that I've been working on, and I know Senator Polanki has also been working on for many years, and really critical to the protection of cats and dogs here in the state of Michigan that are utilized for lab testing. And I want to be very clear, in no way are we trying to stop any of that testing that occurs. Many of those tests are required by federal law for FDA approval and to get products to market. What we do want to do is make sure that the dogs and cats that are utilized for that testing here in the state of Michigan are adopted out to loving families when they can be. There have been instances in recent history here in Michigan where it has been uncovered that some of those animals would have gone to organizations that would have euthanized those cats and dogs simply because they were used for that testing. And when they were put up for adoption, thousands of families across the state came forward and said, we'll take those dogs, we'll give them a loving home. So today you'll hear from a constituent of mine, David Ribello, who adopted one of those dogs, Teddy, who this law is named after. Teddy was adopted into a home where there was a beagle that was not utilized for lab testing in that home already, and became a loving animal in that home that is just like any other dog you would see today. I've had the opportunity to go and play with Teddy, and he interacts with people just as any other dog that I've come across or the other dogs that are in that home. So I think we've proven that this can be done in a very safe way. We've put exemptions in the bill to make sure that the labs only adopt out animals that are suitable to live in a home. And so I don't think this in any way hurts the research or investments that we see here in the state, but it does protect these cats and dogs and make sure that they are not unnecessarily euthanized simply because they were used for this lab testing, that they are able to live a full life in a home with a family that's willing to provide that care. So thank you very much for hearing the bills today. I know you'll hear from other folks today that, have done a lot of work on this legislation as well, and I think we've come to a great product, and I really do appreciate you taking it up. Thank you, Chair Miller.
Thank you, Chairwoman Miller and members of the committee for allowing me to testify today on behalf of Teddy's Law with Senator Hertel, who graciously let me partner with him on this two-bill package. My bill, which is tie-barred to Senator Hertel's bill, specifies lab reporting requirements and fines for noncompliance, though Senator Hertel's bill is the main bill. Allowing adoptable laboratory dogs and cats to go to loving homes instead of being euthanized is the right thing to do. In fact, 15 other states have laws like Teddy's Law. And it's not only supported by animal welfare groups like the Humane Society of the United States, but it has widespread bipartisan support across the state from thousands of Michiganders who, you know, we love our dogs and cats. Senator Hertel and I have worked closely with stakeholders. This legislation spans years in the making, especially with animal groups and the research labs with whom we have recently made half a dozen or so significant compromises that should make this bill package nonpartisan and a no-brainer. Around 600 dogs, mostly beagles, and around 100 cats are euthanized by lab workers each year in Michigan, despite the vast majority of these animals being perfectly adoptable. Many people wonder why so many beagles are used in testing. You may have seen the beagle lab rescue maybe a year ago from a really bad facility in Virginia, and I posted something about that, and I got 1 million requests on Facebook, literally 1 million, about how can we get some of these dogs. So why beagles? They're small, they're docile, and they're forgiving. And these animals have never touched grass, never played with another animal. I don't know if they're petted at all, but my gosh, Is there a bill that makes more sense? I don't know a bill that's out there. Just let the animals that can be adopted go to loving homes instead of being automatically killed. That is my testimony. There are other people who would like to testify as well, but we're happy to take any questions.
Members, do we have questions for the senators at this time? Representative Vanderwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. In the state of Michigan, how many animals right now do we have a number that are truly being euthanized? And
No, the Humane Society of the United States gave me this number, 600 dogs and 100 cats.
but is that nationally or the
No,
state?
in Michigan.
In Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your testimony today. One of the questions I had was, it seems like in looking at all of the documents we have, that healthy dogs and cats is kind of the phrase that returns to say, healthy dogs and cats would be adoptable. Is health the only metric by which the adoptability of an animal would be considered, or are there also behavioral metrics or others other than just simply physical health?
I believe it's health and safety is a language in the legislation. I have to go back and double check it. But I think there's an interesting note to this. Some of the animals that are utilized for testing, the federal government requires that those animals are euthanized for further research, right? So pathology tests and things like that have to be done. So there is an element of that does occur just due to FDA requirements and federal law. What we're really trying to get at is to make sure those animals that don't present a health or safety risk, that they can be adopted out. I mean, I think the challenge here is that we have seen real cases where animals that could have gone to a loving home were euthanized. And we've seen the other side of that when that's been detected, those animals have been rescued, and those animals have been adopted out now, that they can live in a loving home in a very in a safe way, and live long lives. These dogs seem to have long lifespans as well. And so we did put a section in the bill that a attending veterinarian can use health and safety as a reason to say that a dog is not adoptable. I think that's just to make sure we're not only protecting the animal, but protecting the home that it would be going into as well. We want to make sure this is done in the right way. And so that section of the bill is I think is sufficient.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Roth.
Thank you for the testimony also. Do you know if any of these facilities do adoption on their own?
Yes, they do. And I don't know if any are requesting to speak, but some have programs with, employees and families of, employees. They do have adoption programs, but it's not mandatory, and they do that on their own accord. But we'd like to make it law for all the labs.
And Representative, that's one of the changes we worked with the labs on. They came to us and let us know that they do have employees that'll either adopt these animals out or programs that adopt the animals out to employ family members and other people in the community. And so the original bill that we had didn't allow for those, really ensured that this adoption would happen through a shelter. And we put a stipulation in the bill to allow for the adoption directly from the facility to occur as well. And so that's one of the concessions that we made, and listening to the labs, understanding that they do this. And really, if that's happening today, we want to make sure that continues to happen. Those dogs it's getting to the end point of this bill, right? Those dogs are going into homes instead of being unnecessarily euthanized. And so they would be, under this legislation, they would be able to continue that practice today.
Thank you.
Representative Diefendorf.
First, I apologize for being late to this very important hearing. I have a question about our standard for healthy, and I'm asking this as somebody who has only had households full of rescue animals. But half of my rescue animals came of animals being dropped off at pet stores and therefore unable to be reincorporated back into the population. And so some pet stores end up with a large number of animals who have been neglected, who are not well, and they get fostered. So I am part of a program where I'm fostering animals that are already ill, are injured, and you foster the animal with the understanding that it may not survive. You're doing the very best you can. And then you end up with pets for forever if you can bring them back to health. I adore these animals, but they did not start out healthy, and often still they're not going to be in the best physical health. I have a rabbit that was adopted and had the crooked head illness that some rabbits have and usually don't survive from. And after much medication, it is now healthy, and I have a rescue bunny for life. So I guess I'm wondering, what is our standard for healthy? Could a standard for healthy get in the way of some of these beagles being adopted by folks who would be willing to do that additional work should they come into a home with illness or with disability?
Representative Devendorf, I know that the bill stipulates that it's up to the veterinarian. I know there are saints like you out there who will take sick animals. We've also worked with, the trial lawyers and different groups because we don't want people to be put in situations where, an animal comes from a lab and it's aggressive and it bites somebody and yada yada. So the short answer to your question is it's up to the veterinarian.
I would add as well, I mean, and I'm not trying to paint all of these labs as horrible organizations that don't look out for the interest of some of these animals in the work they do. Some do have behaviorists on staff. The Humane Society for sure has animal behaviorists on staff as well, that will be able to work on some of these issues to make sure that these animals, we want to make sure that every animal that can be adopted out is adopted out. And so I think this will have to be a work between the department, those labs, and others to make sure that that work is actually occurring. And I think to be noted that any complaints that somebody has, if they don't believe that a facility is operating under the letter of the law, they would file a complaint with MDAR. Those would be investigated here in the state as well. And there's fines in the legislation to make sure that they are adhered to.
We do have the president, CEO of a very wonderful humane society here who can also provide her expertise.
Thank you. Next, Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for bringing this legislation forward. I know, Senator Hertel, I contacted you to talk to you about this, and I do believe that one of the things that we talked about, of course, is we're looking out for animals that potentially be aggressive, right? Those types of things. And so that's important, too, when we're looking at this. Those are factors that have already been taken into account. I'm certain that the veterinarians are who they are. They are the pros. They know how to go in and they know how to figure out which pets would be viable beyond, any type of basic care. And so I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate this. I, too, am working with the Humane Society on some stuff. I'm working on some legislation on pet advocates that perhaps I can talk to you all about later. So appreciative of what you're doing. And I was on reg reform when this came up last term, right? We heard testimony on this, and I was disappointed that it didn't make it across the finish line then, but I'm real hopeful that it will this time. And so anything I can do to provide some additional support, by all means, let me know.
When an animal comes from the lab and if it's not adopted into their unique adoption program, it would go to Humane Society, where they also have a whole team of experts that aren't going to let animals go out that are going to hurt someone.
Vice Chair Pice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any stipulation that the animals be given to no-kill shelters? And is it correct that the shelters must be licensed?
First, Representative, let me thank you for your work on this legislation as well. So our Vice Chair Pai has had the companion House bills to this package as well, and I know has had considerable conversations and done a lot of work. So thank you for your efforts on this. We have worked with some that had concerns. The original bill allowed for some municipal shelters to be used, and some of those are kill shelters just based on capacity issues and things like that. And so we worked with those who had a concern to make sure that wasn't included. I believe the language we have in front of you today would only allow dogs to be adopted out to shelters that are no-kill shelters. If there's language that needs to be strengthened in that regard, we're willing to work on it, but I think we've gotten to a good product on it. Remind me of your second question.
Licensed facilities?
Yeah, so I think it's, I don't see an avenue through this legislation. I'm looking to make sure that a dog could be adopted out without a licensed facility. The only caveat I would say is the exemption the piece of the bill that allows the labs themselves to have adoption programs to adopt these animals out, I guess they wouldn't technically be licensed as shelters. So I want to be clear about that, but I think anything else in the bill will ensure that these dogs are adopted out through qualified licensed shelters.
There being no further questions, thank you for your testimony. We'll now move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Our next presenter will be Blake Goodman with the Michigan Humane Society. Please come on up.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Miller. Members of the committee, my name is Blake Goodman, and I have the honor of serving as Michigan State Director for Humane Society of the United States. On behalf of the Humane Society of the United States and our supporters here in Michigan, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of SB 148 and 149, known as Teddy's Law, introduced by Senators Polanki and Hertel, to whom we give our unyielding thanks for their advocacy. This legislation would require research institutions to take reasonable steps to provide for the adoption of healthy dogs and cats no longer needed for scientific purposes. The Humane Society of the United States strongly supports and advocates for both animal protection and public health. While federal law regulates the care and use of research animals while they're in the laboratories, it does not offer any protection to the animal once research projects come to their end, except as regarding humane euthanasia. Teddy's Law simply provides an opportunity for dogs and cats to live a life in a home as an adopted pet once their time in laboratories has come to an end, an opportunity that we believe every dog and cat deserves. 15 states have similar laws that require adoption to be considered, and numerous research facilities across the United States and Michigan have instituted successful adoption programs for dogs, cats, and other animals. Research facilities are allowed to use their discretion to determine whether an animal is eligible for adoption through a veterinarian and would be afforded immunity from civil liability resulting from the transfer of an animal. Importantly, the reporting on successful adoptions requested in the bill does not require the disclosure of any proprietary information or of the type of research conducted on any animal. Throughout this process, including when being passed out of the Senate, we have worked alongside the senators to incorporate feedback from stakeholders into this legislation, and just want to be clear that for us, we remain open to considering constructive ideas that we believe would improve the bills and the way that they would function as law. Adoption programs, in addition to benefiting animals, can decrease stress and improve morale among laboratory workers. Those who have adopted former research dogs, both laboratory workers and not, can attest to the resilience and affection of these animals once they're given the chance to flourish in home environments. Our animal shelters in Michigan, including, again, I want to say the same thing as Senator Polanki, the wonderful one that you'll hear from today, have extensive experience in placing animals into homes that will best suit their needs. This law would ensure consistency across research institutions and help make adoption available to as many dogs and cats as possible. Teddy's Law, we believe, is a win-win solution for dogs and cats in Michigan laboratories and the workers who form bonds with these animals. On behalf of our supporters in Michigan and across the United States, we request a vote in support of both SB 148 and 149. Thank you again, Chairwoman Miller, members of the committee, for this opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have in regards to legislation.
Thank you. Representative Vanderwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. I'm just going to ask a quick question. Out of all the facilities here in the state of Michigan, how many of them do not already offer adoption?
So I think that would have to be a question for the labs. I think one of the reasons why we, as a organization, we as a community of advocates don't have those answers sort of readily available is because of the lack of reporting that just goes on generally in that regard. And so that's not to put weight one way or another. That's just to say that we don't know that because the department doesn't currently, as I understand it, okay, the department does not currently gather that information from laboratories that do or don't operate those sorts of programs. We know that those programs exist. If they're successful, we applaud them for existing. But I think the number and the success of them is still questionable when it comes to just written out data. I think there's anecdotal evidence that you'll hear probably from folks later in testimony. But that's one of the reasons why we feel it's very important, just generally, that the reporting requirements exist in the bill as to the adoptions themselves, whether that's adoptions internally or that's adoptions externally out to local humane societies.
I don't want to come across the wrong. I think we need to know how many facilities do not do this. If it's already taking place, and in most cases I believe it is, why do we need a bill then if it's something that's already being practiced? And maybe the bill sponsors can fill me in further after the session today or after a committee. But if it's already taking place, why do we need a bill to put in place a rule or a law that's already being done?
Can I respond?
Yes,
Thank you
please.
very much. I think, and again, we applaud anyone who's operating a successful program. Anytime that an animal can be placed in a loving home, I think it's a win as far as we're concerned. The fact is that there's just simply more animals than there are, undoubtedly, than there are employees and employee families. And so I think that when you look at just the numbers, I can't imagine a world, and again, we don't have the reporting to substantiate this one way or another, and so we're all working on anecdotal understandings of how those programs function or don't. I just can't imagine a world in which the maximum number of healthy animals do end up finding homes. I think it's much more likely that there are a good number of animals that do find homes through internal adoption programs if they're successful. And then there's a set of animals that come after that are healthy, that could be adopted by a member of the population. What happens to them? And I think that this bill, or this set of bills, would create a situation for animals like that. If they're successfully adopted through an internal adoption program, that's great. Then what happens to those animals for whom there just isn't a person, right? It's not, again, it's not a value judgment in that moment. It's just to say there may not be enough people there to adopt, or friends and family, et cetera, to adopt all of those animals. The other thing I'll say is that our local humane societies, this goes back to Rep. Fitzgerald's question when we're talking about health and safety and behavior and et cetera. Our local humane societies may be or are, in my opinion, in a really good position to, for example, if an animal has a correctable behavioral issue that would make it unpalatable for a person that works at a lab to adopt, because a lab has a veterinarian but not necessarily a behavioralist, a local humane society with a behavioralist may be able to go through what we in the animal protection world would consider to be a relatively small, cost-effective corrective therapy that would make that animal really easy to adopt and to love. And I think that you'll see that with Senator Hertel's constituent after. So I think that that's the way I would look at it. But again, we would hope that through the reporting, we would be able to assess the viabilities of those internal programs one way or another.
One quick follow-up, if I may, Madam Chair. I appreciate what you're saying. I think all of us in this room love pets, and that's the last thing we want to do. My question kind of gets back, and this is where I think we need to have the data, so the two sponsors, if you can follow back up. My question would be, if we're putting more animals in that may have a behavior issue, et cetera, into facilities for adoption, what kind of space do we have? What kind of life does that dog live if nobody wants to adopt them? So I guess the question goes, where are we sitting today? How many people are doing this? And I look forward to chatting with the sponsors and we can get those answers, but I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you very much, Representative.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To my colleague, when I think about this legislation, I'm thinking about what we do all the time was codifying good practice, right? That's what we do. We do it with the law all the time. And so that's because ownerships can change, just like leadership changes. And so this is why it makes sense to go ahead and get this done this way. I also appreciate needing to see additional data. There's nothing wrong with that. But in addition to that, it's not an either or, it's kind of a both and moving forward with the legislation, simply because we know things can change any given day. And so making certain it's in statute just seems to make sense to me. Thank you.
Rep. Kofia.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And briefly, to follow up, I actually agree with my colleague that having the data is really important. And what I like about this legislation is I believe that is exactly the intent. Then we are not thinking anecdotally in what we've heard, but actually being able to streamline the data and actually work from data and facts in a statewide way. So that's your understanding of the legislation as well?
Yes, so that's my understanding of the legislation as well. So within the reporting requirements, which again we've worked with other stakeholders on to make sure that there's no proprietary information, that we're really focusing on adoption numbers, and we continue to work with stakeholders on that alongside the senators. It's our hope that in coming years, as the legislature, and it's in the natural course of things, takes a look at the effectiveness of the law, that those numbers are going to help guide future legislators, whether that's anyone here or future folks, to make decisions one way or another,
right,
to see whether internal adoption programs are hugely and ultimately successful, and that they are something to be commended, and we should be focused, or you all should be focused more as a legislature on promoting that and working with folks on that, to see whether most labs go through external adoption programs because perhaps they're more cost effective. Again, these are anecdotal, but I think it's important for future legislatures to understand whether or not those are successful programs in a data-driven way. And for us, we think that the reporting requirements are important for those purposes, alongside compliance.
These bills will actually move us from the anecdotal to the data-driven going forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, we have Rob Stocklewitz, Corporate Vice President and General Manager with Charles River, who will speak in opposition. Please come forward.
Thank you, Chairwoman Miller. We'd like Amanda Hagan to start with testimony first, if we could.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda Hagan. She's with the Director of State Governmental Affairs, Animal Health Institute. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak on this important legislation. I'm here on behalf of the Animal Health Institute. We respectfully oppose SB 148 and 149. AHI is the U.S. Trade Association for research-based manufacturers of animal health products, the medicines that keep pets and livestock healthy. Charles River is one of our members, and Rob will speak after me. And Zoetis is also a member of AHI. They were not able to testify here today because of the short notice, but they are submitting written testimony, and they are the largest animal health company in the world. AHI supports offering animals for adoption after they've been used in research. This legislation, however, doesn't make adequate provisions for attending veterinarians, those who are best equipped to determine if an animal is suitable for adoption, to make that decision. As Senator Hertel said, we have had discussions back and forth about what should be the appropriate definitions and role of the attending veterinarian in this legislation. We've made progress on that. We just haven't gotten to the point yet where AHI can remove our opposition. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about background. The animal health industry is committed to the 3 R's of animal research in replacing animals used in an experiment as long as adequate alternatives are available, reducing the use of animal experiments and the number of lab animals used, and refining the methods and treatments of animals used during experiments. But we'll always have to do some testing on animals as animal health companies because animals are the intended recipients of our healthcare products. We support the aim of offering research animals to homes as pets when that is in the best interest of the animal. And this is really the heart of the matter for us. It's been alluded to that, health and safety are the reasons that the attending veterinarian can decide an animal is not suitable for adoption. But what about the best interest of the animal? There are some circumstances when it would not be in the best interest of the animal or a potential adopter for an animal to be made available for adoption that go beyond the consideration of health and safety as SB 149 currently allows. So to spell it out, in SB 149, what it says is, before euthanizing a laboratory animal that is no longer needed for laboratory research, and unless an attending veterinarian determines that euthanizing a laboratory animal is required for health or safety reasons, a research facility shall offer the animal to an animal protection shelter located in the state for adoption. In the Animal Welfare Act, the attending veterinarian is a defined role that has authority to ensure the provision of adequate veterinary care and to oversee the adequacy of other aspects of animal care and use. Use includes the responsibility for the judgment of which animals are suitable for adoption, as this is part of care. The responsibility of the attending vet cannot be restricted to just considering 2 aspects, health and safety, as it restricts their ability to take the actions they're given responsibility for under the Animal Welfare Act. The result would be that instead of the attending veterinarian, who knows the animal better than anyone else, determining if an animal is suitable for adoption, that responsibility would be shifted to the animal shelter community. We're requesting that the attending veterinarian be allowed to practice according to the responsibilities assigned to them in the Animal Welfare Act and be the person responsible for determining the suitability of a research dog or cat for adoption, considering all relevant facts. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll turn it over to Rob.
Any questions? All right, thank you. We'll be moving on.
Sure.
Yes, thank you.
I'm Rob Stockowitz. I'm Corporate Vice President and General Manager for the Charles River site in Mattawan. I'm a board-certified diplomat of the American Board of Toxicology. I've worked for 15 years of my career in large pharmaceutical development, and for the last 9 years, I've been at Charles River, where I've ran 2 sites, and I've run a global organization for Charles River. I've spent my entire career working to bring new medical therapies to patients and pets with unmet medical needs. I assume you may not be familiar with Charles River. We are a global contract research organization that works with pharmaceutical companies in the areas of drug discovery, research, safety assessment, clinical support, and manufacturing to bring new therapies to patients who need them. We are the largest non-clinical contract laboratory in the world. Our site in Mattawan employs 1,800 people in the city of Mattawan, has a payroll of $125 million that is put back into the local community, and of course contracts and uses a lot of local resources from the community. We're the largest employer in Van Buren. We're the largest private employer in Van Buren County. We've been continuously operating as a laboratory in Mattawan since 1962, supporting our clients. Charles River as a whole had 80% of the drugs that were approved by the FDA were worked on by Charles River. A lot of our clients do not maintain the space nor the expertise to do the pharmaceutical development work that we do for them and support them with that expertise. We are a highly, highly regulated organization. We're regulated by the Animal Welfare Act. We're regulated by the Good Laboratory Practices as promulgated by the FDA. We are regulated by global regulatory agencies because most of our clients want to have global pharmaceutical approval of their compounds. We are mandated through the Animal Welfare Act to have an institutional animal care and use committee, which reviews every single study that we do. We maintain animal welfare statements with the Office of Animal Laboratory Welfare, We also voluntarily apply for accreditation from the ALAC Association, which applies the animal welfare guide that's put out by OLAW and goes above and beyond what's in the current Animal Welfare Act. Dogs and cats that are used in our facility are crucial in the development of new pharmaceuticals that improve the standard of medical care and provide new therapies to those who have unmet medical needs. There were 175 materials approved by the FDA since 2000. The Mattawan site participated in the development of 31 of those new drugs, delivering therapies to patients that need them. At this time, there are no successful, acceptable substitutes to the use of animals in the holistic assessment of non-clinical toxicity that provide essential data to predict the safety and risk of a potential pharmaceutical to humans in clinical trial and during marketing, when we all take them to make ourselves feel better. This is why the FDA and other national and regional agencies that regulate pharmaceuticals require animal studies as part of the package that supports the risk assessment to start or continue clinical trials. We consider the use of animals in research a privilege. We take this responsibility very seriously. Study designs are extensively scrutinized and improved by scientific experts at the pharmaceutical company, at Charles River, often with input from the FDA, pharmaceutical divisions, and other global regulatory agencies, and our Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. The applicable regulations and guidance documents help us to answer the necessary questions to determine how to move forward with clinical trials, and these studies judge the risk of those molecules when they're being dosed to humans. Large animals are precious organisms. No dog or cat in my facility is humanely euthanized without a scientific intent. I want to make that clear. I know the committee's asked that question a couple of times. We do not euthanize dogs or cats without a scientific intent in our facility. Charles River Mattawan has maintained a voluntary adoption program for research dogs and cats for many years. This program offers dogs and cats for adoption that are no longer needed for scientific research, and they're considered suitable for adoption in the best judgment of our attending veterinarian. We work with these animals at the site before we adopt them to make sure they have the best chance to be successful adoptees. Our animals are played with, our animals are socialized, our animals are grouped housed, our animals do see grass. We have an outside play area. And I invite any of the representatives who'd like to come and visit our site to come visit it. We're very proud to show it off. We spay and neuter our animals prior to releasing them. We first offer these animals directly to our employees. Many of our employees adopt animals. Our employees are fond of animals. That's the reason why they work for us. They're fond of animals, they're animal lovers, and they are working on the mission of improving human health. Animals that aren't adopted by our employees but are suitable for adoption are provided to an animal shelter that we work with as well to understand the special needs for these animals so they can be adopted out. We are really proud of this program. This program has functioned for several years without legislation, and we do it voluntarily because we think that animals in research that have served their research purpose should be adopted out and should go to healthy homes and happy homes. Beyond our commitment to voluntary adoption programs for dogs and cats for the Mattawan, we would like to be able to support this bill. And as a matter of fact, you heard that 15 states have a bill like this. I actually negotiated the first bill in the state of Nevada for animal adoption. I started out and opposed that bill. After working with the legislative folks, we actually came out in support of that bill. I'd like to come out in support of this bill as well. We all would like to see animals that are suitable for adoption be able to be adopted out to loving families from research facilities. We do think there are other changes that are needed in this bill. I really want to thank Senator Hertel. He's worked a lot with us. He's listened a lot to us as well, but there's a couple other things I think we need to make this bill successful. Mandy talked about the attending veterinarian. That's a responsibility given to a veterinarian in our facility by the Animal Welfare Act. They're allowed to use any judgment beyond just health and safety. So there are other reasons why we would potentially not want to adopt an animal out. We talked about aggression. Very few of our animals are aggressive because they're socialized so well. The beagles are very playful. One of the best times that we have is when we have animals that we're preparing for adoption that go out into our grassed yard that we can release those animals out in, and our staff comes out and plays with them. We have 36 veterinary technicians in the facility. I have 9 veterinarians in the facility. These animals are looked at every day, socialized and well cared for. We want the attending veterinarian, as described in the Animal Welfare Act, to have the judgment of whether or not an animal is suitable for adoption for any reasons that might be beyond health and safety. So that's really the change that we're asking for in this bill. The second change that we're asking for is around the reporting requirements. The number of dogs and cats used at a research facility and the number of dogs and cats adopted from the facility are mandated by this bill, specifically as written in this bill, to make a judgment of whether or not we have complied with the adoption law. The adoption law said, the adoption bills as they're written actually say every animal that's suitable for adoption due to health and safety are offered up for adoption. These numbers of how many animals we've adopted out or the total number of animals used will not be enough for somebody to be able to make the conclusion of whether or not every animal that was suitable for adoption was offered up for adoption. We often see requests for these numbers. We report out against our USDA license an aggregate of the number of animals used in every species that is covered, including dogs and cats, and including the pain category. That data is freely available from the USDA. So we already do report out the number of animals we use in aggregate. Additionally, there's no limit right now to the type of record that we have to keep and to the length of time that the records need to be kept. So we've asked that any report that be submitted be held for a period of 5 years by us. That would be the requirement. And the records that we keep are the records that we need to keep according to the federal regulations for the records we already keep for the sale and the purchase and the use and the adoption of those animals. There's really no benefit to the state of Michigan at this point for collecting the numbers that are being requested in the bill to make a decision on whether or not we are complying with the bill. What we request is that we provide an attestation yearly that says that we've complied with the adoption bill. This is typically what we do in pharmaceutical development. Every single study that we write, we provide an attestation of how we complied with the good laboratory practices and if there are any deficiencies in the compliance of those federal regulations. So this is normal practice for us with literally thousands of studies that we do a year. The number of animal users for dogs and cats in the states, you can count on one hand, okay? Charles River is by far, the Mattawan side is by far the largest user in the state. I know that question came up from the committee and I wanted to be able to address it. If we can successfully incorporate the changes I've asked for, we would actually withdraw our opposition to these bills. Just like you do, we support that animals that can be adopted after they've been used in research should go to good homes. Looking really forward to continuing to work with Senator Hertel on the bill, and hopefully we can get it to a place where we can remove our opposition. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, too, for both being here on today. I know with this bill, this law, this legislation is named after Teddy, and then, you know, we do our homework, and so your facility is the facility where Teddy came from? I want to be clear about that. Is that the facility where he, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it came about from an undercover investigation. It's like, woo. And so I'm just curious, because it's always good to hear and I'm just wondering if some of the things that you talked about today, they're good things, and thank you. But were some of these things birthed out of what happened there? Because sometimes we can take a bad situation and turn it into something really good.
We've actually had the animal adoption law prior to that. Maybe
Okay.
I can tell a little bit of the story about the study that Teddy came from specifically. We had an infiltrator into the facility, somebody that actually was an animal welfare activist that took a camera back in the facility and filmed a couple of studies, including the study that Teddy was on. And that information was released through an animal activist organization, and the video was released. Charles River was actually commended by the professional folks who do animal research for how well those animals were cared for. That study was a study from a client, and I'm trying to be careful here so I don't give away any proprietary information, was a study from a client where the client had went into a regulatory agency and said, I don't think I need to run this study. And the regulatory agency, the federal government regulatory agency, said, yes, we think you do. So the company was already not very happy that they had to run the study because they thought they had supporting data to do it without the study. And this actually happens quite often. We go into the federal regulatory agency with a slimmed down study design or an argument to not do a study in pharmaceutical development, and the regulators tell us they'd like to see the data for whatever reason that they feel that they need it. So that study started because the regulatory agency asked for it. When the infiltrator happened and that video was released, the client went back to the regulatory agency and said, do you really still think we need to run this study? We don't think we need to continue to run this study. And the regulatory agency said, we don't think you need the study anymore. Those animals no longer had a research purpose. We adopted them out through our adoption program. That's the story of Teddy.
Thank you. Representative Diefendorf.
Thank you for being here. While I certainly hope that we can put more research and time into finding alternatives to dogs and cats, we certainly heard your presentation on why you're doing testing and that you feel testing is necessary. That's not what we're here to discuss today. We are hearing you say that you already do adoptions. I guess I am struggling to understand why we wouldn't, as Representative Young pointed out earlier, codify a positive practice of adopting out, and why you would be opposed to that when you're already doing it and you have testified that you prioritize it. And I have a question about what specifically are the reasons that you would want to be allowed in addition to health and safety in order to euthanize a dog? Because you say you would like additional reasons, but you did not specify what those were, and we have already accounted for behavior and health and veterinarians being able to determine. So I would like to know specifically what those additional reasons are that you would like to be able to euthanize the dog, and why we wouldn't just codify a practice that you say is already necessary and that you say you are in compliance with.
Sure, you mentioned behavior being codified, and actually as this bill is written, it's not. It says health and safety, so behavior is not in the bill. The attending veterinarian under the Animal Welfare Act has the ability to be able to make a judgment around the total best interest of that animal regarding the behavior, as well as the health, as well as the safety, as well as the potential for long-term effects of that animal.
So specifically, I'm interested in specifically what are the additional reasons. So is that aggression and this and this and this? So I would love a list of what those reasons are.
Sure, and I think we can talk about that aside after the hearing. I'm more than happy to address that with some specifics. In some cases, animals can be somewhat destructive and actually don't fit into a home. And it's not the beagles, actually. For us, there's a certain breed of dog that's used in a very small number of research study. That's a mongrel hound. These are very large animals. They have the potential in some cases to jump 8 to 10 foot fences. And they actually, in some cases, can be relatively destruction in a home environment. And we've seen that in the past where those animals recycle back to the shelter. We want animals that can function well inside of a home and can be successful adoptees to go out into the community.
So I just want to address that, and this is my last follow-up, Chair, thank you. That I have been a dog owner my whole life. My 2 dogs just passed away within a month of each other recently of old age. But it is a determination and a calculation you make in choosing a dog, whether the breed works for you based on its own physical capabilities, its energy, and there are plenty of breeds that because of their strength, size, energy, are able to jump fences. And in the first few years of a puppy's life, I can't tell you how many sofas I lost. And still, we account for these things with animals and pets due to the fact that they are animals, due to the fact that certain breeds have this much energy, or they have to get past the teething stage, et cetera, et cetera. I guess for me, it doesn't make sense that the strength of an animal or it causing trouble would be a reason for euthanizing it. It would be something that the potential adoptee should know about the animal before adopting the animal. Why would we euthanize a dog for that?
Fantastic statement, frankly. First of all, I'm going to commend you. You are a very special adopter. There are lots of adopters that would not tolerate that in their home, and that's why we see many dogs, not just research dogs, that get recycled back to a facility. So while you may decide that you want to tolerate that, frankly, is the minority, vast minority of folks that actually adopt animals from a shelter. We would not bring that dog back in and euthanize that animal, or keep that dog in the shelter, keep that dog in the facility and euthanize it without a research purpose. We would actually hold that animal until we had a research purpose. That's not the best for animal welfare. Animals sitting, not being used in scientific studies. These animals are bred for research. They're trained for research. They're acclimated to the research facility. The research facility is their home, right? We have to acclimate them to the house. We would save that animal until we had a scientific purpose for it.
No, okay, let me remind members to keep your questions to one question. It will be enforced. Next, we have Minority Vice Chair, I got it. Representative Nyer, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you have proposed language, or are you working with the senator for proposed language to maybe help get this across the line?
We have submitted proposed language to the Senator, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Vanderwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I'm just going to go back to my question that I asked before to the last speaker. I appreciate everything that you do, and I'm just concerned, is it really necessary? Is this bill truly necessary in our state?
As I've said, we already do this voluntarily. I can't speak for other organizations, private organizations that use animals. But with respect to Charles River, who's the largest user of dogs and cats in the state, my answer would be no.
Thank you again, and I appreciate all you do. Thank you.
I have one quick question. So you mentioned the behavior of the dog and what the conditions and circumstances will be. But have you considered working with farmers for that type of dog? Have you reached out to farmers? Maybe they could take the dog?
The way this bill is currently written, that would have to be done through an animal shelter, not directly through us. The bill's written such that we would only adopt to employees. Otherwise, we'd work with an animal shelter. So frankly, that would be up to the shelters to be able to do.
Thank you. I'm just looking at all alternatives
Totally
before
appreciate that.
we make that decision. Thank you. Representative Fitzgerald.
I just have one question. With the safety concern that's got brought up a couple of times, my first indication was regarding behavior of that animal. But one thing would be, is there an environmental concern that potentially if these animals have been exposed to various chemicals or otherwise, that if it came in contact with another animal, is it possible that there's exposure concerns, that they may have various biological concerns, that there are diseases that could spread to other animals? Is that part of the safety determination?
Not diseases, and as I said before, behavior is a very,
Like
very
the
minor
chemicals
component.
used in some of these?
We do not, in many cases, know the potential long-term effects of these potential therapeutic agents that are being administered to the animals. So truly, we can't answer that question. That's part of the risk of adopting a research animal that's been dosed with an experimental compound that served its purpose in research. In some cases where the animal might be administered a radioactive material, which we do as part of looking at biodistribution, we could categorize that under safety, right? We would not want that material released out into the environment.
Representative Young.
I'll make it quick because I just realized, I'm looking at the time, we still got to hear from Teddy's.
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to wrap up
But,
there.
right, but I know you mentioned that there was this same type of legislation in a different state
Yes,
that you
ma'am.
did support.
Yes, ma'am.
So is it that you just don't support this legislation in its current form, but you do support this type of legislation because you already told us you do? But I just need to hear that
We
for myself
absolutely
one more
support
time.
this type of
Oh,
legislation.
okay.
We submitted a letter
Okay.
to this committee with proposed language. We've also proposed that language to Senator Hertel as well. So with those changes, and of course, we would like to read the bill once we get to a final version, we do have the potential to withdraw our opposition, and I would do that.
Thank you. We're going to move on. Thank you so much. Our next testimony will be from Tanya Hilgendor with the Humane Society of Huron Valley.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Chairperson Miller and committee members, for the opportunity to express our support for SB 148 and 149, known as Teddy's Law. I am the CEO of the Humane Society of Huron Valley, which is a multi-service nonprofit serving Washtenaw County and roughly 24,000 animals a year, adopting out more animals than any shelter in Michigan. We have over 2,000 volunteers. I am also the chair of the Michigan Pet Alliance, which is an association of shelters, animal controls, rescues, and animal lovers striving to create a better world for the companion animals of Michigan. Roughly 70% of households have one or more pets, and most of them are considered family. We buy them Christmas presents, let them sleep in our beds, and refer to them as our babies. They give us unconditional love and improve our physical and mental health, and are so important to our children's well-being. Because of these close bonds with animals, most people are vehemently against animal cruelty and want to see all animals treated with kindness and respect. The public overwhelmingly supports life-saving rescue of innocent dogs and cats, and 3 out of 4 people say it should be illegal to kill a healthy or treatable animal. We know tens of thousands of dogs in the United States are still used in experiments, animals that have never had names, walked on a leash, or been given a toy, and most are killed at the end of their usefulness. Are beagles the most used breed? Largely because of their sweet and trusting nature. While it is the federal government that regulates the care of lab animals, adoption is an important requirement that our state can make, and how we can show gratitude to the service these animals have provided to human society, as 15 other states have already done. Adoption instead of death, a chance at a happy life, is the least we can do for animals that have been bred for thousands of years to stand by our side. I would add that reporting is an essential part of transparency. We all know transparency is the cornerstone of accountability to the public. Reporting to the state is required of the most poorest animal shelter. If they can do it, any research facility can also do it. I want to stress that dogs are dogs, bred for thousands of years for companionship. There is no breed of research dog. They may have been bred individually for compliance through painful experiments, but they are just dogs. Last year, HSHV took in 35 beagles from cruel conditions in the Envigo breeding facility in Virginia, rescued by the Humane Society of the United States. All were adopted the very same day they were made available to the public, with hundreds of people on a waiting list to take these dogs. They knew what they were getting into. The adoption stories later spoke of fearful dogs unaccustomed to normal dog life, slowly adapting and now thriving in loving homes. One of those dogs was Ernie, whose family said, "The past weeks have been amazing watching him come out of his shell and learn the world and how to be a dog." He went from having very little leg strength to flying upstairs and running zoomies. Every day was a new adventure, but one behavior he knew from the very first day was how to snuggle and be loved. He cuddled right into our laps as if this little love was meant to be with us all along. Dogs are dogs. Like many other shelters, we stand ready to take in more deserving animals like Ernie. This is our area of expertise and has been our focus for decades, following science and best practices. As with all homeless and abused animals, we will provide the veterinary care, the behavioral assessment, the foster care, and the placement services that match them with good, loving homes prepared to care for them. Shelters that do not have the capacity to provide this service simply won't take them in. The public supports this legislation and is eager for the opportunity to adopt. Michigan is filled with compassionate people who find saving an innocent life personally rewarding and know the power of love and loyalty they will receive in return. I'd also just like to throw in that the Animal Welfare Act was passed in 1966. It is incredibly outdated and weak. It does not ensure scientifically the good care of animals. It just ensures that they are kept alive. Also, I would note that the federal government recently passed an act that says the FDA no longer has to require testing on animals for pharmaceuticals because of their concern about animal welfare and poor efficacy of testing on animals. Further, I want to emphasize that this legislation is also good for the employees of labs who I know care deeply about these animals. They want them to get out alive and to be adopted. I personally know workers who have snuck animals out the back door because they didn't want to kill them, risking the loss of their jobs. So this is why we wholeheartedly support these bills and believe Michigan can and should take this humane step, and we hope you will as well. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a few questions. All right, Rep. Kofia.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Madam Chair, I apologize, but I think this question may be for our previous speaker. This is for my peace of mind, frankly. So there was mentioned that Teddy's Law and the investigation by the Humane Society revealed that beagles in the facility were being force-fed fungicide and pesticides as part of the testing. I understand, I think, that was a particular study. But what I would like to know for sure is whether that practice has been discontinued overall within the facility, or are beagles still being force-fed fungicides and pesticides in other studies? So I think it's probably the previous speaker who could answer that question.
Happy to approach if allowed.
Yes, please, but keep your comments very quick. We're fine.
Force-fed is a misstatement. So those animals are not being force-fed drugs. The animals are being dosed in a process called oral gavage, which is not only used commonly for all species of animals in the administration of pharmaceuticals and testing, but gavage is also used in hospitals to be able to deliver nutrients and other drugs to patients that don't readily swallow them when asked.
Thank you, but my question is, whatever term you want to use for the application and administering of pesticides and fungicides, whether beagles within your facility are still being fed those in other studies.
Fed is a misnomer, so I will repeat it again. The animals are being orally gavaged, which is a technique to be able to dose an animal on a study to test a pharmaceutical entity.
No. We're going to move on.
Thank you.
You can take the discussion offline. Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from, let's see here, Dave Rubala with St. Clair Shores Council member and Teddy's dad by Zoom.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have I have Teddy. I don't know if you've been able to see him.
Aw.
He's been listening to you all the time, and so is his sister Cleo. When we got this dog, Well, I'm gonna sort of be nice a little bit, because some of the things I've been hearing weren't quite right. And the gentleman, in all due respect, from the Charles Laboratory, it can't be exactly Xanadu in there, because when we did get Teddy, he was afraid of grass. So I don't know if his facility has AstroTurf or outside grass, or all the dogs go out and some stay in. But Teddy saw the grass as a very unusual thing. So I just wanted to clear that up. And the last gentleman that spoke, well, we all saw the videos of tubes being put down the dog's throat. Now, what they were doing, putting them down the throat, we'll just take it for granted. He's telling the story like it is. Well, that sure isn't a nice thing to do either to the dog, because they look like they were distressed. So I just wanted to say that these dogs are perfectly, my dog is perfectly normal as far as the companionship and the love. And I'm not even going to get involved with all that comes with having a dog in your family. One of the good questions that was asked was, why does the state of Michigan need to do it? Why does the state of Michigan need to do something like this? Because we're all not going to be here at one time. Dave Rebello's not going to be here. Teddy's not going to be here. Cleo's not going to be here. None of you legislators are going to be there either. What we're doing is ensuring something for the future, and we have an historic time to do it right now. All of us will leave a mark on the future that this type of stuff doesn't go backwards and get into a bad spot where we can't undo it in the future. So we're all here at one time, one spot, and we can do something about this to make it very hard. So let me give you an example. I am in transparency, I am on the St. Clair Shores City Council. A few months ago, with the help of Kevin, we passed a ordinance in the city of St. Clair Shores that you couldn't sell pets, cats, that type of animal in our city anymore. Well, someone said, well, we don't sell them right now. And the answer is, we're ensuring that it doesn't happen in the future. They will have to undo an ordinance that is prohibiting it right now. So that's why I can say some of the questions I heard, why does the state of Michigan have to do it? Well, that's our answer. So they always have to do it, because things can change. Teddy is just like his sister Cleo. The mailman's going to come by probably in a little bit, and they're going to bark, and they're going to run all over the house. He begs just like any other dog. He's probably going to bark at the dog next door sometime today. They're just our creatures. That's what all the dogs do. And it's not like it's some crazy thing for them to do it. Some of your dogs may even do worse things than what's a laboratory dog is. And I would ask some of the things that go on in the laboratory. Well, I think it's sort of unusual that you would tattoo a dog's ear. I find it unusual that you would stick a hose down their throat. So it's really not all Xanadu all the time. So we're just sort of ensuring that this type of stuff, we know it's going to happen. Legally, it has to happen. But we all know what we're getting when we adopt a laboratory animal. It's not like our head was in the sand and we thought we were getting one of, Aunt Mary's dogs from her litter or something like that. We know where these creatures come from. And if something happens to them, well, we knew what we were getting. We knew what we were buying into. So, to sort of take that element out of what you guys are talking about, we all know that, yeah, maybe one day they will get sick, but guess what? Maybe one day one of your dogs are going to get sick too. These things just happen. We know what we're getting when we get them. If they're aggressive, well, your dog might be aggressive too. Okay. Your dog might not like the dog next door either. It may not like getting, well, there's a lot to go into the owner and the relationship they have with their pet. These dogs are no different than the ones that you would have. I don't know if you can still hear me. This dog's not going out and jumping fences, and he's not. He can't jump a 10-foot fence. He can't even jump a 3-foot fence. So, do you have any questions for me? I could not be able to get there, which I'm sorry about. There was a video I brought a few months ago. I was there in front of the Senate. They saw a beautiful video from YouTube. And it was really the first week that we had the dog. And there was a TV station that came over here. I think it was Channel 4. And you can see the dog. I can talk. Everybody in that room can talk as much as they want. But you can see the raw footage of like the first week that one of these dogs was brought back to an owner. And you can see his reaction on the grass. You can see how sweet he was to the reporter. He was looking him in the face. So we know what we got. We take precautions. If your dog at home, if your beagle at home was, biting your children and stuff, you'd probably get rid of it or take it to a class and try to figure out, why this stuff is happening. So let's ensure that this stuff stops. Let the dogs go, for God's sakes. Get them out of there after they're done doing their business. What you have to do to them, you have contracts with companies and so forth. And I think the one that the dog Teddy I have, he was from the Charles Laboratories, because I've been there. And for the sake of me, I was able to pull up in a driveway, and that's about it. I know it's a guarded facility, probably for good reasons. But I sure the heck didn't see any dogs running around on the grounds out there. And,
Thank you.
Getting people throwing them sticks and bones and stuff to them, so they were bringing them back. There was none of that.
Mr.
So,
Rubelo, we're going to have to wrap up.
Conditions. What's that?
I said we're going to have to wrap up.
I'm wrapped up.
Okay.
If you have any questions,
Thank
Kevin
you.
has my contact number. You can contact me through him. And if I can get that video to you guys from Channel 4, that would be great. And thanks for the opportunity. Just let the dogs have a second chance. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Hearing none, I will move on to reading the cards. Nancy McGee with Zotis is not wishing to speak, is opposed to the bill. B. Friedlander with Attorney for Animals, not wishing to speak, supports the bill. Ashley Stefan with MDARD, not wishing to speak, supports the bill. Let's see. Ann Griffin with Michigan Humanes, not wishing to speak, supports the bill. And Ann Griffin, not wishing to speak, supports the bill. State Bar of Michigan Animal Law. So let me read that. Yeah. Yes, that's it. So hearing no more questions and no absent members, we will now adjourn. Thank you for your time.